The 2013 Tour de France was the 100th edition of the Tour de France, one of cycling's grand tours. The tour started on June 29 with a 213 km flat stage from Porto-Vecchio to Bastia. The race concluded with a ceremonial stage that ended on the Champs Elysees in Paris on July 21. 22 teams entered the race, which was won by Britain's Chris Froome of Team Sky. Second and third respectively were the Colombian Nairo Quintana and the Spanish rider, Joaquim Rodríguez. German sprinter Marcel Kittel was the first rider to wear the coveted race leader's maillot jaune. Kittel lost the lead the next day to Jan Bakelants, who managed to obtain a 1-second lead after a late solo attack. Australian Simon Gerrans gained the race lead after his team, Orica-GreenEDGE, won the Stage 4 team time trial. Gerrans passed the lead on to teammate Daryl Impey after the fifth leg's conclusion. Chris Froome took the lead away from Impey after the eighth stage, which contained a summit finish to Axe 3 domains. Froome then kept the lead all the way to the race's finish in Paris by consolidating his lead through solid performances in the individual time trials and in the high mountains. Chris Froome became the second consecutive British cyclist to win the Tour de France, after Bradley Wiggins accomplished the feat the year before. In the race's other classifications, Movistar team rider Nairo Quintana won the mountains classification and also finished as the best rider under the age of 26 in the general classification, finishing in second place overall. Peter Sagan of the Cannondale team was the winner of the points classification, with Team Saxo Tinkoff finishing as the winners of the team classification, ranking each of the 20 teams contesting the race by lowest cumulative time. Teams. All 19 teams in the UCI's Pro Team category were entitled, and obliged, to enter the race. 3 UCI professional continental teams, all French-based, were also invited. A Euro-invited pro-continental teams, pre-race favourites. Bradley Wiggins, the defending champion, had focused on the Giro d'Italia, but retired early due to illness. He subsequently pulled out of the Tour de France because illness and injury had left him insufficient time to train. This left Chris Froome, second-place finisher in the 2012 Tour, the undisputed leader of Team Sky, and a top favourite for the race, having won the Tour of Oman, Creta Copyright Riem International, Tour de Romandie and Creta Copyright Riem du Dauphiné Copyright in 2013. Another Team Sky rider, Richie Porte, had also shown excellent form in 2013, winning Paris-Nice and finishing second to Froome in Criterium International and the Dauphiné, but was expected to ride solely for his teammate. Another of the top favourites, Alberto Contador, returned to the race having been suspended from the 2012 race. Andy Schleck of Radio Shack Leopard, the 2010 winner, also returned, having missed 2012 due to injury. Other contenders included Joaquim Rodríguez of Team Katusha, who podiumed both the Giro and Vuelta in 2012, Alejandro Valverde of Movistar team, who placed second in the 2012 Vuelta, his teammate Nairo Quintana, and winner of the 2011 Tour, Cadel Evans, although he might have to share leadership of BMC Racing Team with Tadej van Garderen. Astana's Vincenzo Nibali was a possible contender after getting his first Tour de France podium in 2012 but focused on the 2013 Giro d'Italia. Speaking after his victory in the Criterium du Dauphiné on June 9, Froome said that he was one of 7 possible winners, the others being Contador, Valverde, Rodriguez, Evans, Van Garderen and Quintana. Route and stages. There were 21 stages in the 2013 race covering a total of 3,403 kilometers, taking place entirely in France and like many previous tours. The tour started in Corsica, visiting the only 2 DAR copyright parkments in metropolitan France it had never visited, a Euro Course du Sud and Haute Course. As the 100th edition of the race, the 2013 edition featured some of the famous climbs from the history of the race, including a summit finish in Mont Ventoux on Stage 15, and Stage 18 in which Alpe d'Huez was climbed twice by the riders, with the stage finishing after the second descent. It started in Corsica, in the city of Porto-Vecchio. The island hosted the first 3 stages. Corsica was the only metropolitan region, and Corse du Sud and Haute-Corse were the only metropolitan departments, through which the Tour had never previously passed, and the organizers wanted to combine the 100th edition of the Tour with the Tour's first ever visit to Corsica. To accommodate the Tour entourage during their stay in Corsica, the organizers chartered the Mega Smeralda cruiser ferry to house members of the organization, media and others who work on the Tour, and to host press conferences, although the riders stayed in hotels in and around Porto-Vecchio. The Tour was the first to be completed only on French soil since 2003. It featured a final set of stages which have been described as brutal, including 3 alpine stages in the last week along with a viciously hard time trial. These included a double ascent of L'Alpe d'Huez, the first time the Tour featured a double climb of this scale. There were 8 flat stages, 3 hilly stages, 7 mountain stages, 2 individual time trial stages and 1 team time trial stage. The race covered a total of 3,403 kilometers, and finished at dusk in Paris. The race featured a team time trial around Nice on stage 4, and 2 individual time trials. The other stages were all mass start stages. They are divided in 3 categories, as shown in the table below. The type of stage influences the points available for the points classification and the time limit. The winner of a flat stages is given 45 points, the winner of a medium mountain stage is given 30 points, and the winner of a mountain stage is given 20 points. The race concluded on stage 21, with a nighttime finish on the Champs Elysees copywriters in Paris for the first time. Classification leadership. There were 4 main classifications contested in the 2013 Tour de France, with the most important being the general classification. The general classification was calculated by adding each cyclist's finishing times on each stage. The cyclist with the least accumulated time was the race leader, identified by the yellow jersey. The winner of this classification was considered the winner of the Tour. In 2013, there were no time bonuses given. Additionally, there was a points classification, which awards a green jersey. In the points classification, cyclists get points for finishing among the best in a stage finish, or in intermediate sprints. The cyclist with the most points led the classification, and is identified with a green jersey. There was also a mountains classification. The organization categorized some climbs as either or kata copyright guri, first, second, third, or fourth category. Points for this classification were won by the first cyclists that reached the top of these climbs, with more points available for the higher categorized climbs. The cyclist with the most points led the classification, and was identified with a polka dot jersey. The fourth individual classification was the young rider classification, marked by the white jersey. This classification was calculated the same way as the general classification, but the classification was restricted to riders who were born on or after January 1, 1988. For the team classification, the times of the best 3 cyclists per team on each stage were added. The leading team is the team with the lowest total time. The riders in the team that led this classification were identified with yellow numbers and helmets. For the combativity award, a jury gave points after each stage to the cyclists they considered most combative. The cyclist with the most votes in all stages led the classification. Notes: in Stage 2, Alexander Kristoff, who was second in the points classification, wore the green jersey, because Marcel Kittel wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during that stage. In Stage 2, Danny van Poppel, who was second in the young rider classification, wore the white jersey, because Marcel Kittel wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during that stage. In Stage 9, Pierre Rolland, who was second in the mountains classification, wore the polka dot jersey, because Chris Froome wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during that stage. Froome and Rolland both had collected 31 points up to this point, but Froome claimed the polka dot jersey, because he had crossed the line as first on first category mountains more often than Rolland. In Stage 13, the Combativity Award was voted to Omega Pharma Quick Step by the jury to recognize the contributions of the entire team. Mark Cavendish was then selected to represent the team on the podium. In Stages 16 to 18, Michael Niv, who was third in the mountains classification, wore the polka dot jersey, because Chris Froome wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during those stages, and Nairo Quintana wore the white jersey as leader of the young rider classification during the same stages. In stage 19, Christoph Ripplin, who was third in the mountains classification, wore the polka dot jersey, because Chris Froome wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during those stages, and Nairo Quintana wore the white jersey as leader of the young rider classification during the same stages. In stage 20, Pierre Rolland, who was second in the mountains classification, wore the polka dot jersey, because Chris Froome wore the yellow jersey as leader of the general classification during that stage. In stage 21, Andrew Talansky, who was second in the young rider classification, wore the white jersey, because Nairo Quintana wore the polka dot jersey as leader of the mountains classification. Classification standings. Team classification. Prize money: in total, around $2 million was distributed after the Tour. Initially, each team received around $50,000, while each team with at least 7 riders finishing the Tour received $1,600 extra per rider. The individual winner of the general classification received $450,000, with progressively smaller prizes for each individual finishing position, down to $400 for the last rider. The stage winner was awarded $8,000 for a normal stage and $10,000 for a time trial. The money gradually decreased, with the 20th finisher receiving $200. Money was also awarded for crossing the categorized climbs, for the best young rider of each stage, the most combative rider, and the best team on the stage. Doping. 1 month after the Tour ended, it was announced that there were no positive doping tests, but that all tests would be stored, so they could be reanalyzed in a few years once new tests have been developed. References. External links: official website.